When she finally reached that place, all she saw from afar were neon lights and the muffled beat of cheap music. She thought maybe, just maybe, it was a safe place to hide, a doorway where she could catch her breath. But the moment she pushed open the door, she felt it instantly. This place was no different from the prison she had escaped. A dim, smoky burlesque club where even the laughter carried poison. Every face, whether shining or masked, looked at her as if she wasn't a person, only a price. Men stared at the stage like hungry wolves waiting for a spectacle, and before she could even speak, a sharp-eyed manager shoved a cheap costume into her hands. It was as if she wasn't a human being who had run for help, just another product to be used. She pleaded, "I'm not here to work," but the answer was simple and cold. If she wanted to stay alive here, she would dance. In that single moment she understood something painful. Sometimes the places we run toward aren't freedom at all, just another test wearing different colors. Another cage, just painted in red lights. That night didn't feel like an escape, it felt like a storm swallowing her whole. Her heartbeat was so loud it seemed like her own body was warning her that time was running out. Every turn she made, she hoped this would be the moment she finally slipped out of his reach, yet she could almost feel her fiancé's breath on the back of her neck, as if he was only a step behind. She ran through empty streets, holding her clothes close, telling herself that if she stopped now, everything would end. Rain-soaked roads, broken streetlights, and the cold wind only made her fear sharper. She once believed in love, but now she wasn't a girl escaping a man, she had become a shadow fleeing for her life. Her steps never slowed, because every memory, every wound pushed her forward. In her eyes flickered a fragile hope, maybe somewhere there was a corner of the world where she could breathe freely, where no one controlled her fate. But every time she paused, she heard that familiar voice echoing behind her. She knew this run wasn't just to save her body, it was to reclaim her soul. She only needed to run once more. Just when life finally started to feel steady, her past came crashing back into the room. Her fiancé stormed in, grabbing her like she still belonged to him, his grip rough and possessive. She had never fought back before. But this time, something inside her didn't break, it rose. For the first time, her eyes held not fear, but fire. And when the billionaire stepped forward, pulling her free from that violent hand, she realized things had changed. Some people don't show up to take control, they show up to protect. The party fell silent. Everyone turned to watch. And the man the world believed would never bend, never kneel, suddenly dropped to one knee before her. No ego, no money, no power, just a wounded heart asking for one more chance at something real. "Will you marry me?" he asked, not as a billionaire, but as a man afraid to lose her. And her "yes" wasn't spoken out of desperation or escape. It was the first choice she made freely, without fear, without chains, without anyone pulling the strings. For the first time, love and freedom stood on the same side. That evening, as the two of them stood quietly in the same room, something subtle but powerful shifted. For once, his voice didn't carry the sharpness it usually did. It sounded tired, almost human, as if his heart had finally run out of excuses. And she, who had learned to hide every part of herself, suddenly felt that maybe, just maybe, there was someone who could understand the silence she carried. When he said softly, "You overshine them all," it didn't feel like a line or a command. It felt honest. Raw. She saw in his eyes the same pain she had been running from, the fear of being left, the weight of pretending, the exhaustion of always being strong. It was strange, yet comforting, like someone had quietly stepped inside the storm she lived in. When he asked her to dance, it wasn't for show. It was as if he wanted a moment where neither of them had to pretend, no roles, no masks, no lies. Two people, both broken in different ways, moving together in a room that finally felt real. For the first time, they weren't performing. They were simply themselves. The moment she stepped into his mansion, she felt a strange hollowness in the air. Everything was exquisite, golden chandeliers, polished marble, grand silence. but none of it felt alive. And when the maid handed her a ring, she froze. It wasn't bought for her. It belonged to someone else, someone whose absence still haunted the walls of this perfectly cold home. The photo she saw next made her chest tighten, the runaway bride. A face so eerily similar to hers that she felt like she was staring into a tragic mirror. In that instant, she finally understood. His harshness, his control, his anger, they weren't signs of power. They were the scars of a man who had been abandoned so violently that he built a fortress around his heart. He didn't want her. He wanted a replacement. A shadow of the woman who had left him at the altar. A role to be filled, not a soul to be seen. And she realized something deeper: she wasn't the only one running. He was too. He had run so far from love that he no longer recognized it. They were two broken people standing in the same room, still trapped in their own pasts, unable to escape themselves. As she stood near the stage, trying to steady her breath, the whole atmosphere of the club shifted. The noise slowly softened, as if every pair of eyes had turned toward one man. She looked up and saw him, a figure stepping into a narrow beam of white light, dressed in a flawless suit, carrying a silence that felt heavier than his presence. People called him Mr. Myers, the kind of billionaire whose name people whispered and whose shadow could make a room behave. And when his gaze met hers, she felt something unsettling. He wasn't just a wealthy man, he was someone who had turned cold out of necessity, someone who used money the way others used armor. His eyes weren't powerful, they were wounded, hiding a sadness wrapped in arrogance. He walked toward her slowly, and everyone else seemed to disappear around them. With one sentence, he didn't ask, he commanded her fate. "I rent her for the weekend." The words hit her like chains snapping shut. She realized she hadn't escaped danger at all, she had simply stepped into a richer, stronger trap. Freedom had slipped just a little further out of reach.